What's going on, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with the book club today, Dreamland by Sam Quinones. This is the second half of the last chapter. Is a great time to be a heroin dealer is the name of the chapter, page 259. All around the town were the signs of what could be accomplished by selling heroin. Women's clothing stores, law firms, new markets, beer dispensaries were six to a neighborhood now, and they were new ones with wooden floors, security cameras, and computerized cash registers. Large houses owned by young men were everywhere. No one could build such houses on the wages made working sugarcane. At the Feria del Olot, cell leaders sponsored basketball teams, importing semi-pro squads from Monterrey, Mazatlan, Hermosillo. Each team had at least one African American hired to improve the team's chances. In the town's horse parade, which once featured common farm animals, saddles worth $5,000 sat atop horses worth 4 times that. The Jalisco system expanded during the 2000s to include families from all over the region. The pioneers from the Tejeda Sanchez clan had for many years only recruited people they were in some way related to. That changed after Operation Tar Pit sent close to dozens of these workers to jail. The U.S. heroin market was expanding, fueled by Americans' addiction to prescription opiates. Jalisco bosses quickly reconstructed their cells, bringing in workers now from families they were not related to. Over the next few years, as Jalisco cells multiplied, their demand for labor grew voracious, and the opportunity to work heroin was now open to many more families. Most of a generation of young men found work in it. One driver I spoke with, just beginning a prison sentence, told me he began to think of going north when a heroin trafficker he knew in his village built a house with an automatic garage door. Old people stood in amazement and watched it open and close. He saw other drivers, guys he grew up with, return and buy beer for everyone at the plaza. Girls flocked to them. Without land or prospects, he signed up too. It was like a little weed that just keeps growing until it invaded the whole village, and eventually it didn't matter what your last name was, said a former driver I spoke with, who went by the name of Pedro. Anyone with desire to go up and try his luck could do it. To most of Ranchero Mexico, Chiva was a disgusting thing. But like the song says, dirty money removes hunger too, Pedro said. When my brother went up north, my mother was saying, I don't know how you can sell that garbage. But when she saw the money, she was very happy. Cell leaders had to recruit drivers from new ranchos and especially from Nayarit's capital city, Tepic, nearby. The new recruits no longer had family connections to the heroin pioneers. What's more, they had work already. They were painters, construction workers, bakers, butchers. But these were dead-end jobs in Mexico, and humiliating when many other men had new trucks and houses and money for the banda. So before long, driving a major U.S. metro area with your mouth crammed full of balloons of heroin was a viable economic option, kind of like SSI in eastern Kentucky, for a much larger swath of restless young men in and around Jalisco Nayarit. In several Jalisco neighborhoods, virtually every able-bodied young man had gone north to sell heroin. The working-class Landereñas and Tres Puntos neighborhoods, not far from the town's rodeo arena, were among them. The flat neighborhoods, with some still unpaved streets, were a mix of modest houses of concrete block, mechanics shops, mom-and-pop markets, small beauty salons, and crowing roosters. The neighborhoods became sources of labor supply for the Jalisco heroin stores in the U.S. Selling heroin up north became fashionable, almost a rite of passage, for Landereñas and Tres Puntos young men. Most would learn a little of America beyond strip mall parking lots in the Jalisco heroin hubs of Columbus, Charlotte, Denver, Portland, and Salt Lake. Pedro had done many dead-end jobs in Nayarit. His father taught him to hate drugs. Pedro never listened to the ballads, the narco corridos that recounted how traffickers died in a blaze of glory. But I was tired, he said years later, of work that led nowhere. A brother-in-law was offered work selling heroin. Soon several of Pedro's brothers went north too. If they need anyone, let me know, Pedro told his brother-in-law. By then, Pedro had watched the business spread across Jalisco. He remembered as a boy seeing a man who just returned from the U.S. He was sitting atop a fine thoroughbred horse that no one in town could afford. He was drinking beer, this man, and was the subject of gossip around town. Since then, at least 24 of Pedro's friends had gone to work as drivers in the Jalisco heroin system as it spread across the U.S. Every one of them went with the dream of earning enough to start a car shop or open a tortilla stand or to buy a taxi. Not one ever did. True, they built houses and bought clothes for their families, those Levi 501s especially. But they spent the rest on beer, strip clubs, and cocaine, and walked the streets of Jalisco for a week or two, the object of other men's envy. When their money dried up, jonesing for that quick cash, they went north as heroin peons again and again. The Jalisco labor pool never dried up. Young men were always eager to return and push heroin, strung out on the high of coming home a king. When he got a call from a cell boss, Pedro figured he would be different. He wanted to earn enough to open a bakery. The boss sent him and another young man to the border and paid for them to cross with a group of migrants. The other kid was headed up to Minneapolis to sell. Pedro was sent to Columbus, and from there his boss sent him to another city that was deemed virgin territory. He was given certain rules. No blacks. His boss feared African Americans. Once a customer brought a black customer along. The boss pulled a gun and told them to get out and never come back. The kids Pedro sold to were all white, always ready to try out their high school Spanish. Hola, amigo, ¿cómo estás? Me gusta mucho la cerveza. Pedro and his co-workers found a furnished apartment. Pedro didn't want to stand out, or drive more than he had to. When he wasn't working, he was in the apartment playing Xbox. He made $1,000 for a few weeks of work. Then he was arrested and convicted of trafficking. Authorities shipped him to prison. There he studied for his GED at 25 cents an hour and passed. He also worked as a prison landscaper and a cook, making $23 a month. It was enough to afford him a television, a radio, and his own food. By the time he was released, he had made $900, almost what he had made selling heroin. They sent him to El Paso, where an officer took him to the bridge leading to Ciudad Juarez and told him to start walking. "Don't come back," the officer said. A month later, back home, Pedro received a letter from the prison. It contained a check for $430, the remainder of what he was owed for working and studying for his GED. On the day of Operation Black Gold Rush, a year after the arrest of the junkie bailiff in Nashville, hundreds of officers fanned out across 15 U.S. cities gathering up Sanchez clan heroin crews, 138 people in all, drivers, telephone operators, suppliers, as well as numerous local addicts. That day, federal court looked like a hospital ward. Junkies were throwing up, sweating, and falling off of their benches. "If we didn't arrest them, they were going to die," Mabry said. Marshals rushed doctors to the court. Several junkies had arraignment postponed because they weren't fit to understand the judge. Like Operation Tar Pit 6 years before, Black Gold Rush showed the vast expanse of the Jalisco system, in this case operated by just one extended family. Nashville was connected to Ohio, to North and South Carolina, Indiana, Kentucky, and to several states out west. Indicted in absentia in Tennessee, Alberto Sanchez, or Uncle Beto, remains in Mexico, possibly Guadalajara. As happened after Operation Tar Pit, the Sanchez heroin cells quickly reconstituted. His networks and those of his family are believed to encompass most of the state of South Carolina, including Myrtle Beach, where police have 6 times dismantled the Sanchez heroin cell, only to see it return each time. DEA sources and traffickers themselves tell me Sanchez family cells operate also in Denver, Charlotte, Indianapolis, Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, Cincinnati, Columbus, Knoxville, Memphis, Reno, and Portland, Oregon. Whole new labor pools were becoming available in Nayarit as young men in dead-end jobs signed up for driving stints. Up in America, new, younger, and wealthier customers were emerging everywhere. It was a good time to be a heroin dealer. All right, we'll continue on page 264 in the next couple of days. The next chapter is called The Criminal Case. Hope you're enjoying the book, guys. Keep fighting that good fight.